The story begins in a middle school where a new teacher is taking attendance. He starts calling out names, Iguchi, Kikuchi, and then comes Sumiko Tamugi. And just like that, we meet our main character. Tamugi answers the roll call, but there's something unusual. White chrysanthemums are placed on her desk. Now, if you don't know, white chrysanthemums symbolize sorrow and are commonly used at funerals, so naturally the teacher is taken aback. When he asks about them, Tamugi simply apologizes and says she'll remove them. But as she moves the flowers, the class erupts into hushed laughter, mocking her for reasons that aren't immediately clear. Something's off with how the class treats her. The teacher senses the strange atmosphere as well. Later, we see a discussion about bullying, and guess who brings it up? The same teacher. Let's call him Hitogoroshi, or just Hito. Hito asks a fellow teacher about bullying in Tamugi's class after noticing the vase on her desk. His colleague confirms it. It's bullying. But this leaves Hito confused. When the other teacher asks which student Hito thinks is being bullied, he replies, Tomugi. And at that moment, his colleague reacts with an unexpected lack of surprise. This catches Hito off guard, so he asks if the teacher already knew about her situation. The teacher denies it, but casually mentions her timid personality, adding that kids can be especially cruel to someone like her, an easy target. Hito doesn't push the conversation further, but something about this whole situation doesn't sit right. On a rainy day, we see Hito running through the downpour, searching for a place to take shelter. Luckily, he finds one, and to his surprise, Tomugi is already there. At first, while wiping his glasses, Hito didn't recognize her. But once he puts them back on, he realizes it's Tomugi and greets her. She responds politely, though her tone remains neutral. To start a conversation, Hito makes a casual comment about how bad the weather is, but it's clear Tomugi isn't particularly interested. The two of them sit in silence, watching the rain continue to pour outside. As Hito looks at her, he starts debating whether this is the right moment to bring up the bullying. As her homeroom teacher, he feels responsible and wonders if he should ask her directly. While he's lost in thought, Tomugi calmly opens her drink and starts sipping. Hito watches her for a moment, and then, unexpectedly, she offers him some. He hesitates before politely declining, his face slightly flushed. Tomugi resumes drinking while Hito stays quiet, gathering his thoughts. He knows this is his chance. If he doesn't ask now, he might never get another opportunity. Finally, he gathers his courage, calls out her name, and when she looks at him, he carefully brings up the vase incident, indirectly addressing the topic of her bullying. Hearing Hito's question, Tomugi casually replies that Mukai-san was the one who placed the vase on her desk that day. Hito looks confused. This wasn't the answer he expected. Seeing his reaction, Tomugi elaborates. Mukai-san has a crush on Kimura-san, but Kimura-san likes Tomugi. Since Tomugi rejected him, Mukai-san got angry. Hito is even more puzzled. He doesn't understand why Mukai would be upset. If Tomugi had accepted Kimura's confession, Mukai still wouldn't have had a chance. But regardless, Hito understands the situation now. Even so, he points out that the other students also seem to be turning their backs on Tomugi. Tomugi then explains that Mukai isn't just some random classmate, she's popular and comes from a wealthy family. Because of that, it's not surprising that the other students naturally side with her. To them, ignoring Tomugi is just the easier choice. Hito takes a moment to process this. He hadn't expected such an insightful explanation. He comments on her sharp observation, but Tomugi dismisses it with a shrug. Trying to comfort her, Hito confidently tells her not to worry. He'll take care of the situation as her teacher. But instead of relief, Tomugi simply gives a small smile and, in a casual tone, says, "I'm used to it." Her response catches Hito off guard. He was expecting gratitude, maybe even relief, but instead, it feels like she's already given up. Eventually, the rain stops, and the two start walking together. As they walk, Tomugi suddenly asks why Hito became a teacher. Hito gives a simple answer. His parents were teachers, so he naturally became interested in it. Tomugi responds with a quiet, "Really?" Then, without warning, she reaches out and touches Hito's hand. Hito freezes, eyes widening in surprise. He turns his hand slightly, staring at the unexpected contact, his face turning red. Flustered, he asks why she did that. But in that instant, Tomugi's entire demeanor shifts. Her tone drops, her expression unreadable. "Hito-sensei, you're such a liar," she says with an unsettling calmness. "You don't care about being a teacher at all, do you?" Hito is left speechless. Before he can even respond, Tomugi cheerfully calls his name one last time and walks away, leaving him standing there in silence. Later that night, at Hito's house, we see a cat waiting by the door. The moment Hito arrives, he greets the cat warmly, crouching down to pet and play with it. For a while, he seems relaxed, but something is bothering him. After that, he turns on the TV, hoping to distract himself. But no matter how much he tries, his mind keeps drifting back to what happened with Tomugi. It's not the fact that she held his hand that unsettles him. It's what she said to him. He replays her words over and over in his head. "You don't care about being a teacher at all, do you?" The more he thinks about it, the more it gets under his skin. Because the truth is, she wasn't wrong. He realizes he became a teacher for no particular reason. There was no passion, no grand purpose behind it. It just happened. And now, as he reflects on his daily life, he admits to himself that he's been living each day without any real direction. He lets out a quiet sigh, sinking further into his thoughts. "A middle school girl saw right through me in seconds," he thinks to himself. And that realization? It's embarrassing. Hito wakes up the next morning to find his cat staring at him, waiting for a response. He absent-mindedly pets it, still lost in thought. At school, Mukai approaches him with a serious expression and calls his name. She tells him she has something important to report. Tomugi is involved in compensated dating. Hito is taken aback. He stays silent for a moment, but Mukai continues, explaining that she saw Tomugi late at night in the entertainment district with an older man. From the way they interacted, it was clear that he wasn't just a friend or a boyfriend. There was something more going on. She looks at Hito intently, waiting for his reaction. Although Hito finds it hard to believe, Tomugi doesn't seem like the kind of girl who would do something like that. He reassures Mukai that he will look into the matter himself. Satisfied, Mukai leaves, while Hito watches her go, deep in thought. He suspects that Mukai might be lying to tarnish Tomugi's reputation. But his doubts are shaken in the next scene. Tomugi is walking through town with an older man. The man looks exactly like a stereotypical NTR villain, shady, well-dressed, and up to no good. Hito happens to be nearby and witnesses the scene with disbelief. The old man gestures toward a direction as he chats with Tomugi. Strangely enough, Tomugi appears happy while talking to him. However, the man's face and body language give off a bad feeling. His intentions are far from good. Observing from a distance, Hito is certain that this man isn't Tomugi's parent or relative, but before jumping to conclusions about compensated dating, he decides to follow them. He trails them for a while until they arrive at a train station, and then Hito sees something that leaves no room for doubt. The old man places his hands on Tomugi inappropriately, touching her in a way that makes Hito's stomach turn. But Tomugi doesn't resist. She doesn't even seem bothered by it. Then, the man hands her an envelope thick with cash. Tomugi accepts it, her face slightly flushed. Hito watches everything unfold from a distance, and at that moment, reality hits him. Tomugi is, without a doubt, involved in compensated dating. Hito, still in shock, staggers to a nearby bench and sits down. His mind is blank. For a moment, he considers pretending he didn't see anything. Like a coward, he thinks about turning a blind eye and walking away. This moment serves as the first subtle hint to the audience that there's something deeply flawed about his character. A red flag that will only become clearer with time. Lost in thought, he struggles with what to do next. Then, Tomugi's harsh words resurface in his mind. "You don't care about being a teacher at all, do you?" The memory stings, but it also fuels him. Even if he isn't the perfect teacher, abandoning a student's problem isn't right. Motivated by this thought, he decides to intervene. As he looks back at Tamugi and the old man, an announcement echoes through the station's speakers. An express train is about to arrive. Passengers are advised to stand behind the yellow tactile paving for safety. In that moment, Hito sees something that makes him hesitate. Tamugi and the old man embrace like they are parting ways. The sight disgusts him, and in an instant, his resolve wavers. Why should I get involved? He thinks. He's a piece of shit anyway. Why pretend to be a good teacher now? But before he can leave, something completely unexpected happens. Tamugi, her expression turning cold, suddenly shoves the man. Hito watches in stunned silence as the old man stumbles backward, right onto the train tracks. His body teeters on the edge as the express train barrels toward the station. And then, impact. The man is crushed instantly. Blood splatters across Hito's face, the metallic scent thick in the air. He closes his eyes in horror, trying to process what just happened. But before he can react, something even more grotesque occurs. The force of the impact sends the old man's severed hand flying, and it lands right on Hito's head like a thrown ball. The train screeches to a halt. The station descends into chaos. Hito stares at the lifeless hand in shock before his stomach turns, and he starts vomiting. As he struggles to regain composure, he senses a presence watching him. He looks up and sees Tamugi. She has seen everything, but instead of looking afraid or panicked, she laughs. Hito, still gasping for air, stares at her in disbelief. The sight of her laughing at such a horrific scene is more terrifying than anything else. And then, police officers rush toward them, their footsteps growing louder. The scene shifts to a flashback from 10 years ago. Hito, a young and relatively new teacher, walks to school, greeted by one of his students. He greets her back before noticing something unusual, earrings on her ears. He calls out her name, Tomita. Tomita turns to him with a curious expression. Hito points at her earrings, raising an eyebrow. Realizing she's been caught, Tomita blushes and lets out a nervous chuckle. As she removes the earrings, she admits, if the school finds them, they'll just confiscate them. She hands the earrings to Hito, expecting him to keep them. Curious, Hito asks, "Did you buy these yourself?" Tomita shakes her head. With a small smile, she reveals that they were a birthday gift from her boyfriend. Hito looks at the earrings in his hand before returning them to her. "I'll pretend I didn't see them today." Tomita's face lights up. Without warning, she hugs Hito in excitement. They continue walking together, and Tomita, still smiling, asks, "How do you know my name? You're new here, right?" Hito sighs, looking a bit embarrassed. He explains that he lacks confidence in his teaching skills, and because of that, he decided to at least memorize all his students' names, including their first names. Tomita listens intently. Then, with a bright smile, she says, "You're the ideal teacher." For a brief moment, those words fill Hito with warmth. But that warmth is short-lived. The scene abruptly changes. A police van is parked near a bridge. Sirens wail in the background. Hito, now frantic, rushes toward the scene. He spots another teacher and immediately asks what's happening. The teacher, looking grim, responds, "It's Tomita! She jumped into the river!" Hito's breath catches in his throat. Suicide? The teacher shakes his head. He doesn't know the details, only that Tomita is gone. Hito stands frozen, unable to process what he just heard. Then, another scene from the past surfaces. The same old man from before, the one from the train station, appears in the flashback. He's speaking to Hito, inquiring about Tomita's situation. He mentions reports that she was being bullied. Hito hesitates. He looks away. Then, with a weak voice, he mutters, "I don't know anything about that. I'm just a newbie teacher." The flashback shifts again, to Tomita's funeral. Hito stands among the attendees, his heart weighed down by sorrow. But then, he overhears whispers. Some of Tomita's classmates are standing nearby, mocking her. They say cruel things about her, laughing as if her death means nothing. Hito clenches his fists. At that moment, everything becomes clear. Before he can react, the flashback ends. Hito wakes up in his bed, breathing heavily. His forehead is damp with sweat. A soft meow brings him back to reality. His cat is waiting for him, looking up expectantly. Shaking off the lingering nightmare, Hito gets out of bed. He takes a deep breath and heads to the kitchen. It's time to make breakfast. At school, Hito is approached by a fellow teacher who greets him and inquiries about a rumor circulating among the staff that Hito had witnessed a tragic accident. The question catches Hito off guard, momentarily filling him with panic. Struggling to maintain his composure, he quickly explains that a drunken man had lost his balance and fallen onto the tracks. The other teacher simply nods in acknowledgement, unaware of Hito's internal turmoil. Later, in the classroom, Hito conducts the morning roll call. He goes through the names methodically until he reaches Tsumugi. The moment he utters her name, his breath hitches, his eyes widening slightly. Memories of the previous night flood back. Across the room, Tsumugi raises her hand, waiting for his response. Hito remains frozen for a brief moment, his mind racing. Then, forcing himself to regain composure, he resumes the attendance as if nothing happened. The next scene shifts to the school rooftop, where Hito stands alone, lost in thought. The weight of everything he witnessed lingers heavily on him. Then, a voice disrupts his solitude. "Why did you lie to the police?" Hito turns sharply. Tsumugi stands a few feet away, looking at him with a calm, almost amused expression. She steps forward, her gaze unwavering. "You told them the old man was drunk and lost his footing, but that's not what happened, is it? You saw everything." Her casual tone unsettles Hito. Before he can respond, she continues, "I pushed him." A chill runs down Hito's spine. The way she says it, so direct, so unaffected, makes his stomach churn. For a moment, he doesn't react. Then slowly, he exhales and mutters under his breath, "So, it wasn't just a dream." Tsumugi tilts her head, momentarily caught off guard. "Wait, are you being serious right now?" Hito remains silent, then, as if shaking off the weight of the moment, forces himself to act normal. He sighs and finally responds, "I have a duty to protect my students. That's why I told them what I did." Tsumugi watches him intently. Hito continues, his voice steady but his hands clenched. "When I saw you with that man, I was shocked. But when you pushed him, I told myself it must have been self-defense." For the first time, Tsumugi's expression softens. Her cheeks take on a faint blush, and after a brief silence, she murmurs, "Thank you for that." Then, with a small smirk, she adds, "I never imagined you thought about me so much as my teacher." Hito, despite himself, feels a strange sense of relief. But then, before he can react, Tsumugi reaches out and gently touches his cheek. For a fleeting second, the moment feels almost intimate, like something out of a romance scene. But if you were expecting that, you'd be mistaken. With a smirk, Tsumugi leans in slightly and says, "In the end, you didn't do this for me. You did it for yourself." Hito's face stiffens. She continues, "Think about it. If an investigation happened, you'd be dragged into it too. You were there when it happened. You're my homeroom teacher. If things got messy, wouldn't you be held responsible?" Her words land like a cold blade against his skin. "So really, you were just protecting yourself." Hito doesn't respond. He simply stares at her, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. Hearing this, Hito instinctively pulled his hand away. A flicker of fear crossed his face as he scrambled to defend himself. "How can you even say that? There's no way I'd think like that." His voice wavered slightly, betraying his unease. But Tsumugi didn't flinch. With the sharp gaze of a mastermind protagonist, she tilted her head and simply asked, "Is that so?" Then, with a calm yet cutting tone, she called his name, "Hito. You acted like you did all this for the sake of your student, but deep down, you didn't actually care, did you?" Hito's breath hitched. His fingers curled into fists as desperation crept into his voice. That's not true. What you're saying makes no sense. Before he could finish, Tamugi grabbed his hand. Hito froze. Her eyes locked onto his, piercing straight into his soul. Then, with a knowing smirk, she murmured, "It's written all over your face." Hito's body tensed as she continued, "Your thoughts. I can see them. So troublesome. In the end, it was just some sleazy old man who died anyway." His expression faltered. His eyes widened as if he had been completely exposed. But just as the tension reached its peak, Tamugi let go of his hand and giggled. "Just kidding." In an instant, her sharp demeanor vanished, replaced by an innocent, almost sweet expression. She looked up at him with playfully wide, adorable eyes, as if nothing had happened at all. As the realization hit, Tamugi suddenly gasped and blurted out, "Oh no! The next class is about to start." Without wasting a second, she turned on her heels and rushed away, quickly apologizing to Hito while promising that she'd catch up with him later. Hito remained frozen, still processing everything she had just said. But just as she was about to disappear from sight, Tamugi abruptly stopped. With a bright, cheerful smile, she glanced back at him and casually remarked, "By the way, I don't mind if you tell the police the truth about what happened." Then, without another word, she walked away, leaving Hito standing there, completely stunned. Later, while teaching in the lab, Hito found himself unable to shake off his thoughts about Tamugi. Her behavior gnawed at him, the way she seemed to peer straight into people's hearts. It wasn't the first time either. The way she spoke, her expressions, it was as if she could see through him entirely. Doubt crept into his mind, but he quickly shook it off, muttering to himself that the whole idea was ridiculous.
As the scene shifted, Hito was seen walking through the school campus when he suddenly heard someone calling Tamugi's name. His eyes followed the sound, leading him to the basketball court, where Mukai and a few others were playing a match. Tamugi, however, looked hesitant, clearly uncomfortable being there. The game continued, and Mukai seized an opportunity, jumping to score while deliberately knocking Tamugi down in the process. Tamugi crashed onto the court, and Hito, watching from a distance, saw her tear up from the impact. The coach rushed over, asking if she was all right and suggesting she take a break, but Mukai smirked, casually dismissing her with a mocking remark about her being clumsy. However, to everyone's surprise, Tamugi wiped her tears away, straightened up, and firmly insisted on continuing the match. Hito observed silently as the game resumed, his gaze fixed on Tamugi. Mukai, seeing Tamugi still in the game, decided to take her down again, convinced she was nothing more than an idiot who didn't know her place. As Mukai made her move, she aimed to hit Tamugi in the face with her elbow. But this time, Tamugi dodged effortlessly, her focus completely locked into the game. Mukai's eyes widened in shock. Before she could recover, Tamugi struck back, hitting the ball with precision, directly at Mukai, sending her tumbling to the ground. As Mukai lay there stunned, Tamugi slowly stepped toward her, an eerily calm yet chilling expression on her face. She tilted her head slightly and muttered, "Oops, my foot just slipped." Everyone watched in stunned silence as Tamugi raised her foot, as if about to kick Mukai in the face. The tension was suffocating, Mukai's eyes filled with panic, her body frozen in fear. But at the very last second, Tamugi's foot landed just beside her head, slamming into the ground instead. The court fell into chaos as everyone rushed toward Mukai, who had burst into tears. The air was thick with unease as they checked on her, while Tamugi stood there, completely composed, her expression unreadable. Hito, watching from afar, could only wonder who exactly was Tamugi. In the staff room, Hito sat in silence, his mind replaying Tamugi's words about the police incident. The weight of the situation bore down on him as he picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over 110, just one tap away from making the call. But at the last second, hesitation gripped him. Doubt crept in, was this truly the right thing to do? Before he could decide, a sudden shout of his name jolted him from his thoughts. He flinched, looking up to see a fellow teacher approaching with urgency. Confused, he asked what was wrong. Without a word, the teacher thrust his phone forward, insisting he take a look at the news. Something serious had happened. Hito took the phone and scanned the article. The headline hit him like a thunderbolt. The old man who had been killed by the train, the very same incident from the first chapter. had now been identified as a suspect in an unsolved case from 20 years ago. His name had finally been revealed, Tetsu Kasuya, 56 years old. As Hito read on, his expression remained unreadable, but internally, a storm was brewing. The article detailed the case, known as the Gemini Incident, a decades-old investigation that had gone cold, lacking the evidence to identify the true perpetrator. But now, a confession had surfaced, a written statement from the Gemini killer himself. The moment Hito's eyes landed on the words Gemini Incident, his fingers tightened around the phone. A subtle tremor ran through him, though he masked it well. Beside him, the coach let out a low whistle, shaking his head at the irony. So the man who died right in front of you, turns out he was a murderer from a cold case. He exhaled sharply before adding, in the end, it was divine punishment. But Hito didn't react. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, his mind somewhere far away. He was drowning in thoughts, piecing together fragments of information, trying to make sense of it all. The coach noticed his silence and, sensing something was off, called his name. Later that evening, Hito sat before the TV, the soft glow of the news screen illuminating his face. But he wasn't really watching, his mind was still trapped in the revelation from earlier. The Gemini Incident. The Gemini Killer. The old man's suicide note. His thoughts raced, forming connections he hadn't considered before. The note left at the train scene had now been confirmed to belong to the infamous Gemini killer. And within that note, something had been written. Something crucial. But before his full thought process could unfold, the scene abruptly cut away. The setting shifted to a quiet, somber graveyard. A weathered tombstone stood tall, worn by time. A soft voice called from behind him, breaking the silence. A woman. She approached with an apologetic smile, gently thanking him for bringing flowers every year. But Hito merely brushed it off, telling her not to worry about it. From their brief conversation, a hidden thread of the past began to unravel. The woman was no stranger, she was the mother of the girl from Hito's flashback, from his early days as a teacher. The weight of the past lingered between them, unspoken yet deeply felt. Then tears welled up in the woman's eyes as she explained her pain, her voice trembling with anguish. She spoke about how the police and the law had failed people like her, people who had lost their loved ones but were still forced to live under the weight of injustice. Hito listened in silence, her words stirring something deep within him. His thoughts drifted to Tomita, one of his former students, a bright, promising girl from his early teaching days, who had tragically taken her own life. He couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility. Rumors had circulated that bullying had driven her to such an extreme decision, but the investigation had been swiftly closed, ruling it a non-criminal case. The school, too, had firmly denied any incidents of bullying, seemingly more concerned with protecting its reputation than seeking the truth. Later, the scene shifted to a televised press conference. A woman, a family member of one of the Gemini killer's victims, stood before reporters, addressing the public. She spoke with a mixture of sorrow and relief, expressing her emotions upon hearing the news of the old man's death. He had taken her twin sister's life, and now, with his passing, she felt that her sister could finally rest in peace. Hito watched the broadcast in silence, his mind clouded with confusion and doubt. He couldn't decide what was right or wrong anymore. Justice, morality, punishment, everything blurred together in an unsettling mess. He didn't know what to believe, nor what he should do. The usual school day began. Hito stood at the front of the classroom, taking attendance. When he called out Mukai's name, an empty desk met his gaze. She was absent. A ripple of curiosity ran through the class as students began speculating. His simple question, "Does anyone know why Mukai is absent?" acted as fuel to a growing fire. Whispers turned into loud murmurs, and then into casual gossip. Some girls snickered as they recalled the previous day's events, Tamugi nearly stomping on Mukai's face. Others added that they had seen her crying afterward. Hito's unease deepened. The careless way they spoke about it, like it was some kind of entertainment, made him feel sick. In the dimly lit school laboratory, Hito stood alone, visibly stressed. His hands mechanically cleaned a chemical canister, but his mind was elsewhere, burdened by everything that had happened. Then, a voice called out from behind him. "Hito-sensei." He froze. Turning around, he saw Tamugi standing in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable as she asked what he was doing there so late. She stood still, waiting for his reply. But something about her presence unnerved him. It was as if he had been caught doing something wrong, even though he hadn't. After a tense pause, he finally spoke. I saw the news. Temugi's eyes flickered with surprise. Hito continued, his voice careful yet firm. You knew everything from the beginning, didn't you? His mind replayed the shocking revelations. The old man was the true culprit behind the serial murders. She had known. He still had no idea how she had uncovered the truth on her own, but somehow she had. And then, his mind wandered back to that moment, the moment when she pushed the old man. His voice was heavy as he asked, why didn't you report it to the police? Temugi's expression hardened. With an icy stare, she answered, the police are useless. For a brief moment, Hito was stunned. Her words cut deep, leaving him at a loss for how to respond. The cold certainty in her voice, the absolute conviction, unnerved him more than he cared to admit. Temugi states that the reason the Gemini case became a cold case was due to the police's negligent investigation. She adds that the old man had connections, including a high-ranking family member who had been pressuring the police from the top ever since the incident came to light. Hito, hearing Temugi's statement, is surprised to realize that she discovered this on her own. Then, with a clumsy expression, she admits that she knew from the start that the police wouldn't be able to help her with this case. They both fall silent for a moment before Hito speaks, as if he already knows the answer. He says that because of what she just explained, she took matters into her own hands and got rid of that man herself, because that was her idea of justice. Hearing this, she hesitates. Justice? No. That's not quite right. Hito is shocked. With a clumsy look, she says, the reason I killed that man was because. Then, with a serious expression, she continues, it's like a misbuttoning. Hito is both shocked and confused. To make him understand better, she gives him an example. She asks him to imagine being in a crowded train and noticing that the person in front of him has their shirt buttoned incorrectly, just one button is out of place. No one else seems to notice it, or maybe they do, but they pretend not to see it. Doesn't it bother you? She asks. She continues, explaining that when you see a misbuttoned shirt, you feel an urge to fix it. Hearing her explanation, Hito begins to feel uneasy, completely disturbed by what she is saying. Hito sits at the table, looking down. After taking a moment, he states that he no longer understands what's right or wrong. He doesn't know anymore. He doesn't know what to do about Temugi. Placing a hand on his head, feeling stressed, he admits that he can't even understand his own feelings anymore. Temugi, in a calm voice, asks if he would like her to teach him. Hito snaps out of his thoughts and notices Temugi's hand reaching toward his face, causing him to panic. She stops midway and instead says there's something she wants to ask first. She asks about the container he was cleaning before she arrived. Hito glances at the container upon hearing her question. She asks what kind of things were in the lab before. He explains that it's a polyethylene container he recently ordered for the next class, then asks why she's so curious about it. Ignoring his question, she excitedly asks if she can take a look. Hito tries to stop her, grabbing her shoulder to prevent her from touching it, but it's too late, the container is already open. It falls to the ground, but nothing spills out because it's empty. Seeing the empty container, she lets out a relieved sigh and says it startled her. She then asks why he suddenly looks so frustrated. Adjusting his glasses, Hito states that he thought something might have been inside. Temugi picks up the container, noting that it's just an ordinary one. But as she looks inside, she suddenly turns her face away, reacting to a strange smell. With a clumsy expression, she says she feels like she's smelled this somewhere before, which confuses Hito. Then, with a serious look, she asks if the smell could be sulfuric acid. Hito, calling her name, immediately corrects her, stating that sulfuric acid is odorless. This catches Temugi off guard. She asks if she made a mistake. She then mentions that just a while ago, she found something strange in the flower bed in front of the lab and thought it might be related to this. As she pulls something out of her pocket, Hito visibly tenses. What she reveals is a pet tag. She states that someone seems to have tried dissolving it with sulfuric acid. Looking at the tag, she reads the name, Fuchi. She then asks if this was a name tag for a cat. Hearing this, Hito looks deeply uncomfortable, as if something he was trying to hide is being uncovered. Temugi continues, explaining that she probably found the tag because it was made of metal and didn't dissolve. Then, looking at him directly, she calls his name and asks if something is wrong. His expression says it all. Hito, trying to keep his composure, insists that it's nothing. But then, as if she just remembered something, Tamugi says, last Friday night. Then, calling his name again, she asks, you were here arguing with Mukai-san, weren't you? She explains that she just happened to see it. We then see a flashback of their conversation. Mukai was arguing with Hito, demanding to know why he was keeping quiet about the incident when talking to the police. Hito, trying to deflect, asks what she's talking about, pretending not to understand. Mukai clarifies, she's talking about the man who fell from the platform that day. He was Tamugi's sugar daddy. Hito falls silent. Mukai continues, pointing out that on the same day she reported Tamugi's sugar dating activity, that man mysteriously died. And the witness to his fall? Hito. This struck Mukai as suspicious. She directly asks if he was covering for Tamugi. Then, with a sharp, serious expression, she asks, was that fall really an accident? Hito, clearly shaken, tries to deny it. What are you trying to say? What else could it be? Mukai doesn't back down. She tells him that, in any case, she's going to report everything to the police. Hito is shocked. He tries to stop her, but she suddenly glares at him and snaps, don't touch me. She calls him disgusting and warns that she'll report him to the school for sexual harassment. Hito is completely taken aback. He mumbles something under his breath, which confuses Mukai. She asks, what did you just say? We return to the present moment. With a mysterious expression, Hito looks at Tamugi and says, you reek of something rotten. Tamugi, unfazed, says she doesn't know what happened between him and Mukai. But then, she asks, could it be that you hated her so much, that you killed Mukai-san? The scene shifts back to the past. Mukai is lying on the ground, blood pooling from her head. In the present, Hito's mind spirals into panic as he listens to Tamugi's chilling deduction. His breath quickens, his thoughts race, he doesn't know how to respond. But Tamugi doesn't stop. She continues, her voice steady and unwavering. After killing Mukai, you had to get rid of the body. That much is obvious. She explains that Hito, being a chemistry teacher, would have known exactly how to do it, dissolving the body using sulfuric acid. She goes on, piecing together the sequence of events. But dissolving a human body isn't something you can just attempt on a whim, right? If you failed, it would only make things worse. You needed a test run, an experiment, before taking the real risk. A flashback emerges. Hito searches frantically for something, his expression dark and calculating. Meanwhile, Tamugi's voice overlays the scene, her tone sharp as a blade. And I know exactly what you used for that experiment. The memory sharpens. In the dimly lit room, Hito's pet cat looks up at him innocent, unknowing. But Hito's gaze isn't the same as before. His eyes are cold, dangerous, void of any hesitation. The flashback ends. Back in the present, Hito snaps, shaking his head violently. No. That's not true. He rejects every word, every accusation. Tamugi watches his frantic denial with an unsettling calm. For a normal person, no, it wouldn't be. But you have a record. Hito freezes. His breath catches in his throat. A sudden, suffocating silence fills the air. His world begins to crack. Because Tamugi knows. She started explaining, her voice laced with certainty. 10 years ago. Tomita, just like Mukai, you killed her, didn't you? Hito's body stiffens. For a moment, he is utterly still, his mind blank with shock. What are you saying? He stammers, his voice barely above a whisper. Tamugi doesn't hesitate. She explains it all, how, just like now, Hito had an argument with Tomita. And finally, as the truth unravels, the past comes into focus. The scene shifts, revealing what really happened all those years ago. In a flashback, we see Hito walking down the street, probably on his way home. However, he suddenly stops when he hears a commotion from the other side and instinctively looks in that direction. Near a bridge, a group of schoolgirls surrounds another girl, ordering her to take off her clothes and stop stalling. In the middle of them, Tomita stands naked, crying, while the other girls laugh, snap pictures, and demand that she spread her legs more. Witnessing this disturbing scene, Hito immediately realizes that Tomita is being bullied. He shifts his gaze to her tear-streaked face, but before he can react, one of the girls orders Tomita to jump into the river. Despite Tomita's desperate apologies and pleas for mercy, one of the bullies coldly shuts her down, warning her not to talk back. Another girl, the one taking pictures, gives Tomita an ultimatum: either jump into the river or have the photos spread all over the internet. Hito watches all of this from a distance, frozen in fear. He doesn't say anything and, instead, slowly steps back, ready to leave the scene. But just as he turns, he hears something that makes him stop in his tracks. The girls casually remark that Tomita actually jumped into the river. One of them wonders aloud whether she's coming back up, but the others dismiss the thought, saying it doesn't matter. Without a second thought, they decide to leave. Hito remains a silent witness, hearing everything but still choosing not to act. Once the girls are gone, he finally steps closer to the riverbank under the bridge where Tomita had jumped. He starts calling her name loudly, desperately trying to find her. Suddenly, Tomita's head emerges from the water. The moment he sees her, he calls her name again and dives into the river to rescue her. Holding on to her, he reassures her that he will save her and swiftly swims toward the shore. However, Tomita, her gaze fixed downward, mutters coldly, telling him to leave her alone and just let her die. Hito is stunned. As they float in the water, she makes her intentions clear: she wants to die. Still unwilling to believe her words, Hito calls her an idiot, insisting that there's no reason for her to die and that doing so would mean letting the bullies win. But then, Tomita suddenly looks up in shock as if she has just realized something. She turns to Hito and, with piercing eyes, asks if he had been watching the whole thing from the beginning. Her words catch him completely off guard. She questions him, asking if he stood by and did nothing, only choosing to intervene after the bullies had already left. Hito, flustered, struggles to find a defense, but he fails to come up with a logical explanation. Just as he tries to say something, Tomita reaches out, her voice filled with anger and contempt, demanding to know who he is to tell her not to die.
She accuses him of being someone who never takes action to change anything. With scorn in her eyes, she tells him that he isn't even fit to be a teacher and, in fact, should never become one. Frustrated, overwhelmed by the weight of her words and the trauma of being bullied, she then declares that she will tell everyone about how he, the so-called student teacher, stood by and did nothing while a girl was being tormented. She promises to ruin his career. Her words leave Hito in complete shock. He freezes, still holding on to her in the water, his mind racing. Then, in a moment of terrifying realization, his grip tightens, and suddenly, he forces her head underwater as if he has made a decision to kill her. Back in the present, Tamugi sighs and casually remarks how troublesome this situation is. Then, with a neutral expression, she recalls that these were Hito's exact words at the time. She asks if she is correct. The scene shifts back to the flashback, where Tomita struggles underwater. Meanwhile, in the present, Hito refutes her claims, calling her name and asking if she even understands what she is saying. However, in the flashback, Tomita's hands gradually stop moving beneath the water. And yet, in the present, Hito insists that he would never do something like that. But the final shot of the flashback paints a different reality: Tomita's lifeless body floating on the surface, confirming the unthinkable: Hito killed her. In the present, Hito vehemently denies Tamugi's accusations and asks if she truly believes he would do such a thing. His voice trembles with fear as he demands to know who she is, why she is doing this, and what her goal is. Tamugi, unfazed, calls his name as if reminding him of something he should already know. Then, with a subtle movement, she points at him, specifically at a button on his shirt that is fastened incorrectly. She calmly states that she is here to correct a button that is out of place. Her words carry a chilling implication: she is here to kill him. In a panic, Hito asked Tamugi if she had any proof that he had killed Tomita. Tamugi calmly replied that she had none, but it was already written all over his face. This answer stunned him. Furious, he shouted, "Don't mess with me," and accused her of toying with him again. Tamugi casually dismissed the accusation, claiming she had no such intention. Then, as if unfazed by the tension, she mentioned feeling thirsty and asked if he could make some coffee. For a moment, Hito hesitated.
But then, as if trying to regain control of the situation, he agreed and went to prepare coffee. As the coffee brewed, he discreetly grabbed a suspicious container from the lab. The label was in Japanese, unreadable to most, but it was clear, whatever was inside was far from safe. He mixed its contents into one of the cups before returning to Temugi with 2 cups of coffee in hand. Temugi accepted the coffee with a polite thank you. But before taking a sip, she unexpectedly reached out and grabbed Hito's hand. He flinched, startled. "What are you doing?" he asked. She stared at him with an innocent, unreadable expression. Then, without another word, she drank the entire cup in one go. She immediately remarked on the bitterness, and Hito, feigning concern, apologized, saying he had forgotten to add sugar. Temugi casually reprimanded him, quoting an old saying, "Even a Buddha's patience has its limits." Then, shifting the conversation, she explained her philosophy of killing, how she followed a 3-strike rule for her targets. And as for Hito? He had already earned 2 strikes. For his own sake, she generously offered him a chance to report his crime to the police, ending everything right then and there. But Hito, instead of reacting with panic, calmly finished his coffee. Then, to her surprise, he stated that he would turn himself in. Suspicious, Temugi asked what had caused his sudden change of heart. Ignoring her question, he instead asked one of his own. "How did you find out that I killed Tomita?" For a moment, Temugi simply looked at him. Then, with an eerie calmness, she replied, "Because I can see into people's hearts." The answer caught Hito completely off guard. She explained that when she touched someone, just as she was touching him now, she could perceive their true thoughts. Sometimes, they came as whispers. At other times, they vividly recall their past actions. From her perspective, we see the fragments of Hito's true thoughts. He internally questioned her claim, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore the chilling sensation of her cold fingers against his skin. She continued, explaining that this ability was how she had accidentally discovered the Gemini killer. A flashback showed her returning a lost wallet to an old man, only to see glimpses of his dark past through physical contact. In Hito's case, it had happened on that rainy day when she first touched his hand. That was the moment she saw everything. Now, with her explanation laid out, Hito finally understood why her demeanor had changed so drastically after that encounter. His mind raced, struggling to process everything. Doubts, fears, and desperate reasoning flooded his thoughts. But before he could gather himself, he suddenly began coughing. Then again. And again. His eyes widened in horror as realization struck. He looked at the coffee cups. Panicked, he turned to Temugi, demanding to know if she had switched the cups. With an amused smile, she calmly confirmed it. She had swapped them the moment he was distracted by her touch. Then, as if stating the obvious, she remarked that his reaction only proved his innocence, because only a guilty man would have poisoned the coffee in the first place. Hito's condition quickly deteriorated. He collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath, his vision blurring. In desperation, he reached out, pleading for help. "Call an ambulance," he begged. Temugi looked down at him, her expression cold. "The audacity," she murmured. "You tried to kill me just to cover things up, and now you're begging for help?" Hito, barely able to form words, still attempted to plead his case. But Temugi, unimpressed, watched as his body convulsed on the ground. With a bored expression, she asked, "Are you reflecting on what you've done?" Gasping, Hito assured her that he was. That he was truly sorry. That he wasn't lying. Temugi's expression darkened. She turned him over, pressing him against the floor as he continued to struggle. But then, through the haze of pain, a singular thought burned in Hito's mind: kill. 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 "I'll kill you, Temugi." His eyes, desperate yet murderous, locked onto her. He still wanted to live. He still wanted to win. Temugi, seeing this final, unfiltered glimpse of his heart, sighed. "You were never cut out to be a teacher," she muttered. And with that, she left him there, to die. The next day, the police arrived at the school. From their classroom windows, students notice the officers and immediately start whispering, wondering what could be happening. Meanwhile, Temugi sat quietly at her desk, unusually calm amidst the growing chatter. Suddenly, a student bursts into the room, visibly shaken. He announces that something serious has happened. He tells everyone that their teacher, Hito, has attacked Mukai and kept her locked inside his house. The classroom falls into stunned silence. No one had ever imagined something like this. The student goes on to explain that the police have already questioned several teachers, yet Tsumugi remains still, barely reacting. Then, he shares some relief. Mukai is alive. Though unconscious, she's been taken to the hospital. A wave of murmurs follows as the students begin discussing how Mukai's family hadn't even noticed she was missing. Someone points out that her family had issues, which might explain the lack of concern. The questions keep coming. Was Hito arrested? Someone asks. The boy answers grimly, Hito drank weed killer in the school lab last night and took his own life. One student remarks that maybe he knew he couldn't run anymore. But another girl wonders aloud why Hito would do something so horrible. No one has an answer. From a distance, Tsumugi continued to listen, her face unreadable. The conversation shifts as one student mentions that the police searched Hito's house. There, they found a suicide note saved on his phone. He confessed to killing a student named Tomita 10 years ago. Got it. We then see the police visiting Tomita's mother, finally revealing the painful truth behind her daughter's death. They inform her about Hito's dark deeds, and the revelation leaves her utterly shocked and devastated. The scene then shifts to another day. Tsumugi is walking to school, crossing the street like usual. As she makes her way through the crowd, she accidentally bumps into someone. In that brief moment, her hand brushes against the person's arm, and suddenly, a disturbing vision flashes before her eyes. She sees that person committing a murder. She looked back at the person walking along the street. Then she states relief and thinks in herself that in this world there are still many misbuttoned shirt indicating us that here are many evil people she will going to kill in future.